Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Culbertson, economist with the Indeed Hiring Lab, here with a labor market update. In this video, I'll cover the supply and demand dynamics inside the labor market that have created such a difficult recruiting environment, and also talk a bit about when we might be getting some relief from some of the supply side constraints that are limiting the number of job seekers. Let's get started talking about demand. What's changed in the labor market over the past couple months is that demand for workers has come back, and it's come back quite strong. And this is something that we can see in Indeed's own data set. This chart here is the overall trend in job postings on the Indeed site. As a job postings aggregator, Indeed scrapes jobs from all across the internet. So this is a look at the online labor market at large. The way we're showing the data in this chart is this is the percent change in job postings since February 1st, 2020. So just making a comparison back to that pre-pandemic baseline. On the left side of the chart, you can see the impact of COVID-19, where job postings on Indeed fell by about 40% from February 1st, 2020 to May 2020. And since then, job postings have slowly but rather consistently come back on our site. In January of 2021, we crossed our pre-pandemic baseline, meaning we hit the point where we had more jobs on our site than we did before the pandemic. And as of June 18th, we are 30.5% ahead of our pre-pandemic baseline. There's a couple key takeaways here. For the overall economy and the labor market in particular, this is great news. It's also great news for job seekers because it means there's plenty of opportunity for those who are looking for a new role. But for employers, what this means is you are facing that much more competition when you're heading out into the labor market and looking to make hires. And unfortunately, this increased level of competition is running up against several factors on the supply side that are limiting the number of job seekers and the folks that are out there looking for work. There's two separate lists I'm going to run through of factors that are limiting the supply of job seekers. A list of factors that have been around since the start of the pandemic, and also some factors that are new to 2021. And as I'm going through these lists, it's important to keep in mind that these reasons aren't mutually exclusive. There's likely a lot of overlap between these categories when we're thinking about reasons that people may not be looking for work. Let's get started with some of the factors that have been around since the start of the pandemic. First and foremost is caution over the pandemic, particularly for workers in roles that have a higher risk of exposure, whether that's from being in healthcare, having a lot of face-to-face contact with customers, or being in close proximity to colleagues for long periods of time. These are the types of roles that job seekers are still cautious about. We can help quantify this through a survey that's run by the Census Bureau. Since the start of the pandemic, the U.S. Census Bureau has been running a survey every week where they ask a lot of questions to see how life has changed during the pandemic. One of the questions they ask is, if you have not worked in the past week, what is the primary reason? In a survey that they ran that ended the week of June 7th, 2.8 million U.S. adults who hadn't worked in the past week cited worries about contracting or spreading COVID-19 as the primary reason that they hadn't worked. So this is a pretty substantial share of our labor force that is sitting on the sidelines, primarily out of concern of COVID-19. This is something that we hope to see come down further in the future. I will say there has been some good news recently. This number was as high as 4.2 million in the month of May. The other factor is family and caregiving responsibilities that have kept some workers out of the labor market. With the amount of school closures and daycare closures that we saw over the past year, that has changed the home life for millions of workers across the United States, particularly for working mothers. And this is a trend that we hope to see reverse later this year as daycares and schools open up at a higher rate in the fall. A third factor that has been around since the start of the pandemic is that some workers expect to return to their previous job. And this factor is illustrative of what makes this recession a bit different from some of the recessions we've experienced before. In a typical recession, when we see the unemployment rate rise, it's usually a pretty safe assumption that there's going to be a lot of folks out there looking for a new role. However, in this past recession during the COVID-19 pandemic, much of the unemployment that we saw was temporary. This data shows what I mean. This data comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. When the BLS runs their survey where we get the unemployment rate, they ask the unemployed a lot of different questions about the conditions of their unemployment. One of the questions they ask is, do you consider yourself to be on a temporary layoff? Meaning, do you expect to return to your previous job? In the month of April, when millions of folks fell into unemployment at the same time, 77.9% of the unemployed expected to return to their previous role. As of May 2021, this number has come down a lot, but it's still elevated at 19.6%. So this shows why over the past year, we may not have been seeing the volume of candidates that we would anticipate at a time like this because so many workers were just waiting it out to go back to their previous job. This is something that we've been dealing with over the past year, and this is a factor that will remain relevant as we continue to move through the COVID-19 pandemic. Moving on to some of the supply constraints that are new to 2021. At the top of this list is the enhanced federal unemployment benefits that were paid out on top of workers' usual benefits. This likely created some type of disincentive to work, but to try to quantify how many workers are sitting on the sidelines of the labor force for this particular reason is rather difficult. We've seen over the past couple of weeks, numerous states come out and make announcements that they are going to end the federal program early or opt out of the program and stop paying benefits before September. And what this does is give us a nice natural experiment where we can take a look at job seeker activity in those states that have made announcements that they're opting out early and compare that to job seeker activity in the states that are remaining in the program until September. This is what we've already started to do on our data. This chart here is making a comparison in click activity on our site, again, between the states that are opting out early and the rest of the states that are staying in the program. And what you're looking at here on the x-axis of this chart is essentially a timeline. So 0 right here at the center of the chart, that is the day that each of these states made an announcement that they were dropping out of the federal program early. And what you can see that there was an increase in job seeker activity on the day that those announcements were made. It was up by about 5%. But as you move across the right side of the chart, what you can also see is that by day 8, after those announcements were made, most of that increase in job seeker activity had subsided. So there's a bit of an increase in some of those states that made announcements that they were opting out of the program, but it was rather short-lived. The real test will come when these states actually start to cut benefits in June and July, and we'll be keeping an eye on our data to see if there's any noticeable impact there. The second reason that is new to 2021 is that there's just more optimism about the economy and the labor market this year. If you think back to 2020, this time last year, everything was very new. Everything was very scary. There was almost no end in sight to COVID-19. So at that time, anyone who was looking for work was probably pretty likely to take whatever job they could find at whatever pay rate they could find. This year, with the vaccine rollouts being largely successful, job seekers are aware that the labor market and the economy are coming back. There's a lot of opportunity out there, so they can be a bit more choosy about the job that they take, especially if they're already on the sidelines of the labor force for one of the other reasons, like childcare, caution over the pandemic, or the benefits. Also factored into that for reason 3 is that leisure time is just much more valuable this year. Again, if you think back to 2020, people couldn't travel, they couldn't visit family, they couldn't take vacations. This year, that's something that people are much more able to do. So for those folks, again, who are already on the sidelines of the labor force for another reason, this gives them all the more reason to take advantage of that enhanced value of leisure time and wait until they find the right job that is the right fit for them. And if we want to think about when we might be getting some relief from some of these factors, I should say, of course, that this is not an official forecast, but it looks like the largest of these factors might start to ease by September and October. As vaccinations rise and case numbers continue to decline, concerns about workplace health should fade out as we move through the summer. Hopefully, most schools and daycare should fully reopen in the fall, so we should see more children going back to school full time, which will free up plenty of adults to rejoin the labor force. And whether a state is ending the program early or is staying in until September, those enhanced federal unemployment benefits will end in September, and we may get some relief there as well. That's all for now. As always, you can keep up with our research on hiringlab.org. Again, that's a free resource of information that's available for anyone who's interested in labor market insights. Thank you for your time and your attention. Until next time, take care.